Across the Fence, we'll discuss the newest Vermont-based novel by a Vermont author. The book is entitled Cooner's Bench. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Our guest this afternoon has spent most of his life in farming. He was raised on a small farm and later spent several years as director of the UVM Extension 4-H program. He had gone on to form Fairmont Farm in East Montpelier. He still works there part-time. John Hall has been with us before to discuss his previous books, and he joins us today for a conversation about his newest book, Cooner's Bench. Welcome.
Thank you, Judy.
Now, this book has this sort of unique cover. Tell me a little bit about it.
This cover was done by an artist at Copy World in Barrie, Chelsea Routhier, and I really liked working with her, and I liked how it came out.
And so tell me a little bit about being a farmer and a writer.
Well, I spend some time every morning writing, and I really enjoy those moments. It's kind of like sort of meditation to me, I guess you might say. And then I work on the farm part-time, and of course this time of year it's very busy.
Right.
But in the winter I have a lot more time to spend at my word processor.
And tell me a little bit about the farm.
It's Fairmont Farm, owned by our son Richard and his wife Bonnie and her nephew Tucker. And we were in the ownership, but we're now retired, but work there.
And so how did you get started writing?
I just wrote for the fun of it, to be creative, and it was sort of magical for me to write these stories. And then it occurred to me that when I was a kid growing up on a farm in Bennington, there were about 10,000 farms in Vermont, and Vermont was very different then. And I wanted to capture that in a book, and so I wrote The West Window, and that came out in 2006.
And then after that you wrote another book, and it was also about dairy farming.
Yes, and of course during my experience in Vermont and on farms, we're losing a lot of farms, and a lot of the ag land was being converted for development, and that was a concern of mine, and it still is a concern of mine. And so that brought about the idea of conserving this 100-acre parcel of land called the Meadow. Yeah.
And this picture that we're seeing now, obviously the cover of your book.
Yeah, the cover of the book is the Meadow, and that was done 3 years later in 2009. That came out.
So now we're going to talk about your third book, Cooner's Bench. That's an interesting title. What's it about?
Well, Cooner is the old hired man, the grandfather type, and he's 85 years old. He's very lame and sits on his bench a lot, and he's always there to lend calm and counsel to the main characters, Jason and Ruth, in the book.
Was there someone like that in your life?
Yeah, I've met a lot of Cooners in my life. You know, they always have some tidbit of wisdom that they can give you.
And so what's the setting for this story?
This is set in Huntersville, Vermont, in 1995. Now we have 1,000 farms, but this is showing the farm that I envisioned in the story, Cooner's Bench, as my wife and I bought in 1965. This small farm, 32 cows, and we see it here in the picture.
Okay. And so what's the book about?
It's about change and the resistance to change, and sudden, gradual change and sudden change. And Jason, the main character, and his sister are invited to join a neighbor in a much larger commercial dairy, and they do not want to do this.
As a matter of fact, when that character's first introduced, it's almost like you get this sort of sinister feeling. He comes up in his car and, you know, throws the gauntlet down and says, "Join me."
Yeah, right, because he recognizes their expertise and he's failing at this. And so that's the beginning. And
it starts out actually with Ruth coming home.
Yes.
She'd been away. Tell me a little bit about why you set her in Georgia.
Well, because I actually spent 2 years in Southwest Georgia in Americas, not far from the Gulf of Mexico, managing a community farm there. And so I was able to bring a lot of that experience into the introduction of this book. And things that, as I remembered, the changes there in agriculture from the crop farmer to very large farming is dramatic.
And so tell me a little bit about what happens with these two characters.
Well, Jason is very interested and involved in his small herd of well-bred Holsteins, and he has this dream that he can stay on this small farm, 50 cows, and hone his interest in the natural world. He's very interested in the flora and fauna and the bird life and so forth around him, and wants to learn more about it. And he sort of dreams that he can do both of these on this small farm.
And so a dramatic thing happens then.
Yes, and that's happened to us in East Montpelier in 1970, that our farm, as we see it in the picture here, and you note the grain silo in the picture, especially. And we had this sudden event that changed our lives dramatically. The barn burned within an hour.
That's amazing. And all that's left is the silo.
And all that's left is this grain silo. And it's incredible that the decisions that have to be made immediately on this event happening.
Can you give me some examples of those?
Well, what are we going to do with the cows? They're running all around. Thankfully, we saved the cows and the young stock. But what are we going to do with them? And we were very fortunate in that we drove the cows to our neighbors.
Right.
And we worked out an arrangement there, our neighbor Austin Cleese at the time. But this event is, of course, stamped in my memory.
Absolutely.
And so it gave me plenty of fodder to embellish it and bring romance and intrigue and into the storyline.
And so why do you think it's important for people to read about these kinds of events that happen? You know, you have a character who's perfectly content to have everything stay the same, but as much as you want that to happen, there are forces at work that you just can't control. Right.
I think all of us experience change in our lives. Some of it's very traumatic. And I wanted to share this to make people change in several levels. One, that Vermont is very different than it was back 40 years ago, and it's very subtle, that type of change. But of course, a fire is a sudden change, and
right.
And it's interesting to see how they dealt with it.
What were some of the things that the characters sort of went through that you had them go through?
Well, here's this beautiful herd of cows, and Jason decides that he does have to take his neighbor up on his offer. And so he's driving the herd through town, which is quite a dramatic event in itself.
If anyone's ever tried to drive cows anywhere.
Yeah, right. And so when he arrives there, there's all these obstacles and problems on this large farm. And he is sort of mentally crippled by it's excruciating for him to bring this herd of nice cows into this scene.
Because this farm has been run down, hasn't been run correctly, things don't work.
Right, right. Even though it's new and modern, it's very troublesome for him.
And so what does he learn from that, though? I mean, that's a huge learning curve.
He basically decides that this is just too much of a transition for him. And meanwhile, he's smitten with a girl in town, and she is wanting a lot more than he thinks he can possibly provide for her. And so it's quite an entanglement for him.
And so talk a little bit about your experience as far as handing your farm over to the next generation, because a lot of young people who want to get into farming don't have that luxury.
Right, absolutely. My wife and I talk about that a lot, how fortunate we are. When we formed Fairmont Farm, initially there were 7 of us in the partnership, and our sons spearheaded this, and we took about a year to write our articles of agreement out and plan what the future was going to be. And Donna and I had agreed to exit when we were 70. And Austin Cleves agreed to exit when he was 65. And just how that was going to happen and how the payout was going to work and so forth. It was very detailed, which I'm very thankful it was.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So you're still writing?
Oh yes, yeah. I'm still writing a book that I'm very excited about. It's Harmony Hill.
And what's that going to be about?
Basically, about one of the main characters facing trauma, and how the other main character is trying to figure out how he can help her come through this, because he's totally mystified because her personality is changed dramatically, and he's trying to discover why she acts the way she does. She's very familiar with the animals and willing to work with the animals, but she doesn't talk. And he's trying to decide how to figure that out.
And so you've had to actually do a lot of research.
Well, I've got to do, yes. I'm in the process, yeah, of figuring that out. Yeah.
And so it's sort of a departure from writing about exactly what you know to sort of branch out into a little further.
Right. That's sort of frankly frightening to me to get wade off into areas that I'm not totally familiar with. And I do ask a lot of questions and call on people that do know to try to get it right.
And so where can viewers buy your book?
At most booksellers in Vermont and on Amazon.com. And it's available in Kindle form through Amazon.
Well, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me today and talking about your writing.
Well, thank you for having me on Across the Fence.
Sure.
Enjoyed it.
Well, that's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.